Joining us now, the reporter on that story, Politico's White House correspondent and an MSNBC political contributor, Eugene Daniels. Also with us, former Republican Congressman from Florida, David Jolly. So welcome both. Eugene, tell us what else you can tell. What else can you report, I should say, about what the Vice President is planning to do as a second act?
First, she has to decide what to do, right? What we know is that over the holidays, both Thanksgiving, when she was in Hawaii, and then wherever she ends up going, spending time with family for Christmas, those are some of the conversations that they're going to have, both with family and senior aides and advisors. The very first step that she has to figure out is, what does it look like to be her while Donald Trump is president again? If we remember, one of the reasons why she became so popular was because of her interactions in committee hearing rooms with Bill Barr or any other nominee from President Trump. So is she going to continue out of office being the tip of the spear of the resistance? Her speech yesterday to supporters and also her concession speech all kind of had the same theme, which is she's sticking around, which that's exactly what she's telling friends and allies that she's calling and thanking them for their support over the last few months. So that's step one. Then it's deciding, what does the next part of her future look like? Is it political? Does she go and run a think tank? Does everything on the table? One thing that everyone is certain of that we talked to is that, one, she's too young to leave political life, but they couldn't really figure out what the next step made the most sense. What's interesting is Harris is more popular now than she was before she ran for president. That's not something that typically happens. And when you talk to Democrats, not many of them are blaming her for the loss, right? They know that it was 107 days, and they nitpick about some of the other things, but it wasn't her as a candidate that they weren't impressed by. And so when you look at 2028 and the names that are kind of bounced around, she has the biggest name ID of any of them for obvious reasons. California governor, also on the table. She's wanted that job for a long time. It would be the most power that she's had in elected office, but there is the sense around some of her allies and aides that it might be a step back, right? Publicly, right? Her as vice president, almost being president, and then going back to be governor of a state. And that's one of the things that they're tussling with right now.
Well, it is the 8th largest. Well, it's bigger, I guess, than most nations, and it's the largest state. So, Congressman, what do you think? What do you think the vice president should be doing?
Well, I think Vice President Harris has much a claim to the future of the Democratic Party as any other Democrat out there today. I also think it's a deeply personal moment for her to decide what she wants to do with the next decade of her career. But this is not an exclusive field. She will not be the only one that will stake claim to be the future of the party, and we know that. Certainly, many of the stars we saw in the last year or two were being talked about as perhaps the future, but there may also be people that aren't being talked about to lead the Democratic Party forward. The thing is, for Democrats, they have plenty of time. You are 4 years away from a presidential race. The midterms in 2 years don't really require a party figurehead. In fact, it would detract from many of the congressional and Senate races in 2 years. So Democrats have plenty of time to work through what their future looks like. I think for Vice President Harris, this truly, having been a candidate who left office, it's a deeply personal moment to figure out, how do you create your identity, particularly somebody that has such a remarkable one leaving the vice presidency.
And Eugene, Democratic strategist James Carville is getting a lot of attention. He slammed progressives on Harris's staff for, I guess, weighing in against her going on Joe Rogan's podcast, which has such a big audience and which was apparently impactful for Donald Trump. What do we know about that?
Yeah, I mean, that conversation definitely happened, right? They were talking about whether or not it made sense for her to go on Joe Rogan, and for probably obvious reasons, some of the more progressive members of her staff were concerned about what that signaled, what that said, and what that, frankly, what that conversation would actually look like. I think what Carville is pointing out, which a lot of people have, is that they should have been everywhere, everything everywhere all at once, like the movie, right? Put her out as much as possible, especially given the truncated dedicated time that she had to run for president, it's unclear, right, if that would have actually done anything. One of the things that's really interesting about these podcasts is the people that were listening to them were already people seemingly, based on the demographics that we know, were interested in Donald Trump anyway, right? So would Harris being on there talking to him, Joe Rogan, for 3 hours change their minds? Possibly, but possibly not. I think the Democratic Party, like the representative is talking about, is really figuring out its own identity. And there's every single decision in these elections are nitpicked. It's unclear what would have changed the thinking, but the moderate and progressive fight, the young versus older fight, all of these things are going to shake up over the next couple of years in this, as the Democratic Party feels like it needs to get its act back together.